would like to introduce the first speaker, who is Tomasz Parkoła from DARIAH Poland, and he will tell us some more about DARIAH Poland infrastructure. Thanks. Please, Tomasz, the floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction. Indeed, today I will talk about recent, so to say, recent developments in DARIAH-PL. Well, it relates to DARIAH-PL infrastructure that we started to build in 2021. But first, let me just give you a short overview of DARIAH-PL, so to say, history. It all started in 2014 when more than a dozen of Polish scientific institutions signed agreement and constituted DARIAH-PL consortium. Soon after that, in 2015, DARIAH-PL joined DARIAH-EU, European consortium, and after 3 years of operation, and well, here I have to mention that without external funding, the consortium was successfully growing and had 10 working groups and 18 members involved. Then in 2019, the consortium successfully applied to be placed in the so-called Polish roadmap for research infrastructures, and since early 2020, DARIAH-PL was one of the infrastructures on this roadmap. Being on the roadmap, we decided to apply for an infrastructure project or an infrastructure project, and in fact, we did it in the middle of 2020. Our proposal was ranked as one of the winning, and in fact, it was ranked on a second place out of 20 proposals. So it was quite a good result for us. And as a result, in 2021, our consortium started its first large-scale project to build this infrastructure for the arts and humanities. And we have to say that for our consortium, it's a key point, so to say, in the history, because it's first such a large project and a unique opportunity to build this modern and advanced infrastructure for the needs of our community. And because the infrastructure is logically composed of laboratories, it was decided to name it DARIAH Lab. That's why you see the logo, this logo on the slides. And here we are now, so presenting the project to our European community. And I will start this presentation with the most important part of the project, so those who are responsible for delivering results of the consortium. It consists of 16 universities and research institutes, 15 of them being DARIAH-PL members, I mean the DARIAH-PL consortium members. All of those institutions are those leading ones in the Polish landscape of digital art and humanities, and they are coming from all around Poland, as you can see on the map. The aim of the project is to build DARIAH Lab, so an infrastructure for arts and humanities in Poland. The infrastructure will consist of laboratory equipment, software tools, integrated digital resources, so various assets, and we will create in the project 5 distributed and interconnected laboratories, so-called laboratories. The project will also have or has strong economic focus, because apart from non-commercial or research-focused use, we will also offer the infrastructure or its services for commercial sector. We plan that the project will have impact in multiple areas. First of all, of course, increased research potential of Polish scientific institutions, but also support of education and regional tourism, as well as in the long run, better understanding of social and cultural differences or better cultural heritage preservation routines. When it comes to the general project scope, it covers 3 key pillars: geoarchaeology, cultural heritage, and musicology. And in each of the pillars, the infrastructure to be built supports specific research approach. For instance, in geoarchaeology, it's non-invasive analysis of documentation of land, landscape, or monuments. To support research in the context of those project pillars, we envisioned 5 interconnected and distributed laboratories, as you can see on the slide. They are interconnected because they can serve each other, or in other words, they can help each other to achieve their goals, and distributed because each laboratory is created as a composition of services or equipment or resources coming from different institutions across Poland. So now let's see key characteristics of each laboratory that we envisioned in our infrastructure. First, we have laboratory of sources that provides source data. The data will be created using laboratory equipment that is to be bought in the context of the project, so like drones with laser or geoscanners, etc. And those digital assets will be provided using dedicated software or services for like data repositories, multimodal corpuses, or with supporting services for persistent identifiers or data streaming. Next, the source data can be, of course, enriched, and this will be done using laboratory of automatic enrichment, where, for instance, text, voice, music recognition will happen, including transcription, annotation, data classification, and so on. Third laboratory is to semantically interconnect and enrich resources, so making discovery routines better fitted to research needs. So here we will work with data aggregation, dictionaries, or data mapping tools. The fourth laboratory provides tools for general data analytics and interpretation. There are also specific tools, for instance, related to music, speech, or gesture perception. But in general, the laboratory is related to large or small scale analysis of data available in the infrastructure. And finally, fifth laboratory will provide means to visualize the data coming from other laboratories. And this will be done using large format 3D or geospatial visualizations on different types. So now, once we know in general terms what the infrastructure will provide, I would like also to present you our overall approach to deliver those project results. So shortly speaking, we decided to use scenarios. So it means that each laboratory we defined, in each laboratory we defined a set of scenarios that we want our infrastructure to support. And based on these scenarios, we are then able to identify potential users, steps needed to achieve specific goal of the scenario, and we can also there specify or then identify some detailed requirements or investigate options for sustainability. And in addition, our general approach is that those scenarios and the infrastructure is created by multidisciplinary teams composed of humanities, computer science, and cultural heritage representatives, because, well, we believe that bringing expertise from these three domains together can give optimal results for our project. And finally, it's also important to mention that we plan to have our complex infrastructure, as you can imagine, visible via a common web interface, which will be available in a one-stop shop style, where you can browse or search services offered by the infrastructure using some taxonomies or vocabularies, and the information about the infrastructure will also be exposed as a data set for integration with external catalogs, inventories, or marketplaces. And currently we are in the initial phase of the project, in the first year, of course, where we work on usage scenarios and we obtain laboratory equipment In the second phase, so in 2022 and 2023, we will work mostly on development, integration, sustainability model, and operational infrastructure, so ready to be used by all potential stakeholders. So to summarize, DARIAH Lab is built to serve digital art and humanities in three aforementioned pillars, and we plan to have the operational level of our infrastructure by 2023. So thank you for your attention, and please, if you have time, visit our website lab.dariah.pl or email us if you have any question after our session. Thank you.
Thank you, Tomasz. And I also copied the link to your presentation in Zenodo in the chat, so other people can also download it and have a look at it. And now I would like to give the word to Antonio Rojas Castro, who will present Ediarum in Spanish, challenges in software localizations. And we will be back to a national example of research of DARIAH infrastructures at the end with a third presentation. So, but now I give the word to you, Antonio.
So yeah, hello everybody, and thank you, Francesca. Today I'm going to talk about software localization. I'm going to focus on graphical user interfaces in the context of digital scholarly editions and on the translation from German to Spanish. I will argue that the screen and computer interfaces enable interaction between users and software, but they can also become a barrier. So the starting point for me is this whole so-called GIL process. It stands for globalization, internationalization, localization, and translation. And well, they are all interdependent processes. And just to clarify, I would like to read the definitions that you can see on the screen. Globalization is in the industry and business area is understood as an organization of business processes to support internationalization and localization. And then we have these sub-processes that are internationalization and localization. The first is the development stages of a digital product or software to ensure that it will function internationally. And then we have localization, which is the adaptation of the product to the target locale by combining a socio-cultural region, normally a country, and a language. And this localization process, it includes translation. So all these terms they're coming from business and industry, but have been incorporated to translational studies recently. And that's a little bit of background in order to understand what I want to talk about today. These four concepts are relevant in the context of the project that I've been working on for the last month. It's called Proyecto Humboldt Digital. And why do they matter? I think they do because it is an international, transnational, and multilingual project whose team members are based in Germany and in Cuba. And that's a very peculiar, I would say. It doesn't happen very often. It is funded, by the way, by German institutions, and the project has two goals. On the one hand, to implement a common workflow for digitizing documents and editing text. Our parent institutions, in fact, they are libraries and archives in Cuba. And on the other hand, we want to publish online a collection of TI documents related to Humboldt's trip to Cuba in the beginning of the 19th century. We believe that there are some historical sources preserved in Cuba. Actually, we know and we have selected some of them, and we think that they are not available yet on the internet, on the web. So that's our aim, to put them online, let's say. In order to do so, we are editing text in a standard format. We are using an editor that helps. We are using a tool that is helping editors to encode the text in TI in an easier manner, and that's the tool that I want to discuss today. It's called Ediarum, and it hides the XML tags to people editing text and displays a visual output instead. It has to be installed like a plugin in Oxygen XML Author. And actually, it's more than a tool. It's a digital environment, and it is connected to open source XML databases, and also has other software components. So in this regard, Ediarum is a piece of software that talks to a greater institutional infrastructure. Of course, it's not an electronic or virtual infrastructure like DARIAH that we saw previously, but it's a digital infrastructure that it has worked in-house in the Berlin-Brandenburgische Akademie, the Wissenschaften. So, oh well, I forgot to say that Ediarum was developed by Pelota, which is the DH center in this institution in Germany, where I'm currently working. Oh, why it's not working? So this is how Ediarum looks like. Here you have the toolbar, and it looks more or less like a word processor. Ediarum helps users to insert TI tags in the text without saying or touching any XML tag directly. And instead, it uses icons and symbols, but as we will see there are also menus in German, or originally the menu was in German. Here you can see how developers can create or modify new functions that insert TI markup in the document. So in other words, it can be customized easily to fit the project needs, and also the data model. In this slide on the left, you have an example of the function that inserts the paragraph tag, and on the right, the same but with the element unclear. So before starting to work for Proyecto Humboldt Digital, Ediarum's interface was only available in German because basically it was used in this institution in the Academy of Science and Humanities of Berlin. But this new project started to collaborate with editors and digital humanities researchers in Cuba. And they, of course, or as it was predictable, they do not speak German very well. So for them, it was more difficult to use this tool. So I started to think about how to support the editing tasks using Ediarum. Again, this means that our interfaces not only enable interaction, but also they can become barriers if you cannot use them because you do not understand the language used in the menus or pop-up windows or the help messages. So it's a barrier that we have to overcome somehow. And that's exactly what I did. To solve this problem, I modified Ediarum's interface a few months ago. I began by internationalizing the code. That is, I created resource files to store content that require a cultural and linguistic modification. And this means basically using a folder called I-18, internationalization, and a document, XML document called translation XML. Then the process consists in separating the text strings of the interface from the executable code. The most important strings are related to action names and descriptions, but not only, because there are also strings in the CSS files. In any case, internationalizing the code means giving keys according to the scheme that you see in this slide at the end. I would like also to add that the internationalization must precede or should precede normally localization, which is the second or the third process. It is a previous step, and sometimes it is the biggest challenge in the localization process. So what I want to argue here is that the localization process itself, as we will see, it's not that difficult. The main challenge was that the software hadn't been prepared for being internationalized. So I had to replace the text with the keys, and that took a lot of effort and some weeks. So then it comes the localization process. As I said, it's actually easier than the previous one. And by localizing, I mean that the translation of the text taking into account. By localizing, I mean that we translate the text of the interface, taking into account the space constraints and the cultural conventions of the target user. So in this case, what I try to do is to localize for Cuban editors that only speak Spanish and English. At the moment, the translation file of Ediarum contains 623 keys, that cover names, descriptions, and other labels of or placeholders in German and Spanish. So in total, we have 1,246 strings in total in German and Spanish. At the moment, it's not localized into English, but we may start doing that in the future. What else I could say? Translating for German into Spanish itself was not very difficult. It took time. There were some cases where I had to adapt the translation into Spanish to meet cultural conventions like date formats, decimal separators, and also I had to change some references that were too German or very German. For instance, references to authority files or catalogs such as Calpe or Jander. These are resources that in the Spanish-speaking world we don't know, what we don't use. So instead of translating literally, what I try to do is provide a more general translation. So here you have an example of how the interface in Spanish looks like. You can clearly see that not only Ediarum uses icons, but also a lot of textual strings in the menus. Here you can see a menu that allows you to click on one button and then insert the TI tag directly in the TI document. And here you see, another visualization of the interface. In this case, where I wanted to show you that this process of internationalizing and localizing it covers the strings found in the interface, but also the strings found in the visualization of the edition itself. So here in this slide, you can see the text, how it's displayed to the editor. And this display has some strings that are either in German or in Spanish. So in other words, these required also a lot of work with CSS files in order to display correctly the text and the labels in German or Spanish. But I haven't covered that part in this talk, so I focus on the functions of Ediarum. And that's it. Just to conclude, here are some learned lessons that I would like to share with you. For me, the biggest challenge was to internationalize the code. So if you're developing a tool, a software, or a website, I would say that please take into account language barriers and support multilinguality by default, if you can. I know that we don't have time, we don't have resources, people, knowledge, etc. But I think it's really important to take into account that when we create pieces of software, they should be internationalized. I don't mean that they should be localized to all the languages, but at least the code should be separated from the text, and the code should be separated one from each other. As I said, I think we should be more aware of how text is displayed in the interface and how we should separate it from code. Then localization itself, it wasn't that difficult, but it took time to translate 600 strings. Of course, they are very little strings. The problem also is that when you are localizing strings, you don't see the context very often. You only see a list of things, so you don't know for sure what you are really translating. The text doesn't exist yet, so you need to translate, then you need to test and see the strings in context to make sense of it, and then the test, etc. In any case, both processes need technical, interlingual, and cultural expertise, and also domain expertise. And finally, I would like to say that this work is just the start, because Oxygen, actually XML author, actually is not available in Spanish. So at the moment, the interface is available in Spanish. So the Ediarum interface is available in Spanish, but the Oxygen XML author's interface is not available by default in Spanish. So we have a mix of languages at the moment. We have English, German, and Spanish. I think we have made some improvements, but the situation is not ideal. And I think this is a task by the developers of Oxygen XML authors to develop in the future, because we can say that for our Cuban editors, it's more difficult to perform their tasks in comparison to our German-speaking editors who have the cool interface in German. And yeah, these are the bibliographic references. There are some related links in the slides that you can download or click. I forgot to mention that Ediarum's framework in Spanish is or can be downloaded from GitHub. And that's all. Thank you a lot for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Antonio. I myself was part of the team that translated TextGrid to Spanish, so I know what you went through. And I can agree with what Sally said in the chat that, you know, we need more internationalization like that. But questions are at the end of the 3 talks, so I encourage you to ask some in the chat if you want, or keep them for later. And now it's time for me to raise this cup, the DARIAH-DE cup, because now it's time for Melina Jander and her talk on the DARIAH-DE data federation architecture as a highway to fair data.
Welcome to our introduction to the DARIAH-DE data federation architecture. As Frank Fischer already said, I am Melina Jander, and I've been working in the Göttingen State and University Library, and specifically in DARIAH and DARIAH-DE since the beginning of this year. And with me, as I already said, is my colleague Lukas Weimer, who will also be around for the sessions with the questions. Today, we will present to you some basic information about the DARIAH-DE data federation architecture, in short DFA. And as our title suggests, we will explain to you why it can be seen as a highway to fair data management. Generally, the FAIR principles, as we all know, have become and are still in the process of becoming the core guidelines for the up-to-date handling of research data. One factor in this process most individual researchers and research institutions experience as restraining is the factor of time. So the core demands researchers and institutions alike make usually refer to not wanting or being able to invest a lot of time and also money and a high level of technical expertise. So the DFA meets these core demands. And as Lukas and I were preparing our proposal for this event, we noticed that we can think of the DFA as some sort of highway to fair data, because at least in Germany, highways are usually free of charge and you can go fast if you have the right car. And you need to, well, you need to follow the rules in the traffic, that is for sure, but usually you are well equipped when you went to driving school. So you know, or you should know what you're doing once you're on the highway. But before we come back to this metaphor, some more information about the DFA. The DFA is most adequately described as a combination of services and tools that are connected through multiple interfaces. Its modular design, that is also displayed in this little picture, allows for both an individual use of the tools as well as a combined use. Those tools and services are first the publicator, which is not displayed on this picture, but the publicator, there will be more information about that shortly, enables you to upload data and index it with metadata before publishing it. The repository, our step 1 on the picture, so to say, is a place in which that data that you upload in the publicator is made findable and accessible. Then we have the collection registry, where you can register and describe collections. The data modeling environment, where your data can be modeled and mapped. And finally, the generic search, which enables you to search for the aforementioned collections and their metadata. A brief notice, the reason why the DMA, the data modeling environment, is displayed in gray letters here is that we will not take a closer look at this component today due to its technical complexity and our brief time frame. So how can the DFA be used? The DFA can be used by everyone with a DARIAH or DFN AAI account. And using the tools is, at least from my user perspective, relatively intuitive. And there are also user guides available in English and German. And furthermore, DARIAH-DE has a help desk where you can ask any kind of question regarding the tools, the DFA as a whole, research infrastructures, or really just generally your research project and how we could potentially help you with it. And what's more, and I mentioned it in the beginning, the aspect of money, all services provided in the DFA are free of charge. So now we will come to the single tools in the DFA in more detail, starting with the Publicator. As the name suggests, this is a tool where you can organize your research data, index them with metadata following the Dublin Core metadata standard, and you can publish it. In the user interface that you can access via your favorite browser, so you do not have to download anything, there are only 3 mandatory metadata fields you need to fill in, and then in theory, your data set is off for publication. There are also multiple, now I'm missing the word, optional metadata fields that you can add to the obligatory ones, depending on how much information you have about your data and how much you want to share, basically. The Publicator is currently available in 5 languages, including English, German, Dutch, French, and Polish. So once you have prepared your collection in the Publicator, you can publish it into the repository. Here, the data is indexed with a persistent identifier and sustainably stored. And also your data can be searched via the top-level domain, which is relatively new. So while the data itself, as I just said, is accessible in the repository, the description of the collection, which is sort of a different level, I think we will perhaps come back in the question section. So the description of the collection finds its own place in the collection registry. This means that here you can both upload information about collections that you uploaded to the repository, but you can also create collection descriptions for collections that are not immediately digitally available. So for instance, if you know about a collection in a museum or an archive, but the objects are not digitized, you can also, or anyway, create a description in the collection registry for those collections. For indexing these collections in the collection registry, a different metadata stream is utilized, which was developed in DARIAH. It's called the DARIAH Collection Description Data Model, quite a name. And it allows for more complex descriptions than the Dublin Core metadata standard that is used in the Publicator. Finally, those collection descriptions are searchable through the generic search. There are 2 types of search in the generic search. First, the simple search, where users can type in a term or a topic they want to find data about. And then there is the more advanced, the extended search, which gives you the opportunity to create a detailed search, which can be useful when you know rather precisely what you are looking for already. So this was a brief description of all the tools combined in the DFA. And we hope we could give you an impression already about what is possible with the tools in the DFA. But finally, we want to come back to this highway metaphor. And for that, I would like to ask you to imagine with me that we have a data management highway and a data management car. And as compared to real life highways and a real life car, they just have some extra features. So for example, the car is not a normal car, but it's see-through and it can be driven by multiple users at the same time. And I think we're kind of glad that in real life this is usually not possible, but for this metaphor, we're trying to imagine that. So for the Publicator, in more detail, this means that we make sure that this data management car we're driving is working fine, and that we think about what we want to transport in it. And once we have decided that, we pack our car with finely selected and well-organized data. And to make sure that others can see this data and understand its order, we describe them as precisely as we can. In the repository then, staying in this metaphor, we've made it to the highway with our special car. And since we made sure that our data is well indexed, we get noticed by other drivers as well. And also others can not only see us, but they can also access the data of our car and vice versa. And then to enter the collection registry, we're changing lanes on the highway. And one condition here to be allowed to change lanes is to not only have the data in the car index, but also the car itself. So we add information to our car as visibly as possible for others to pay attention to the car and not only to the data in it. The good thing about having changed lanes is that we remain visible for those on the, the good thing about having changed these lanes is that we remain visible for those on the previous lane. So everyone who's on this special highway can see us. And in the generic search then, this is validated, so to say, because drivers on all lanes can see and access our data and the descriptions. And we can imagine that, it would be nice to imagine that we are the center of this highway, but of course everyone who's there is sort of the center because they're all in the same level, so to say. So the variety of all these cars and their descriptions and their data, we at least thought create an impression of fair data management, since we can not only find and access everything, but we can also reuse it interoperably. And well, even though this is a rather playful turn on the DFA and fair data management, I hope you got an idea of what the DFA is about, and we're happy to answer your questions if you have any. Thank you.